Hello team, welcome to my session on Coffee with Prabh, and today we're going to discuss about the security best practice of securing the Azure PaaS environment, or how to deploy your application in a secure environment, or how to secure the Azure environment so that you can able to deploy the application in a secure form. This is not a technical session. This is more like a management session. This is more like a consulting session. So if you are a CISO, or if you are a cloud security consultant, or you are an information security consultant, and you would like to audit, you would like to recommend to your customer regarding what is the best practice or what is a to-do list, from that point of view I made this session. I'll try to make this session as short as possible so that in less span of time you will get a great understanding about Azure PaaS deployment security. Who am I? My name is Prabh Nair. For more information, you can refer my LinkedIn profile. And if you're new to this channel, do subscribe to my YouTube channel and also click on the bell icon. So make sure you should not miss any of my future video. So let's start with the first part. Thank you. So team, the reason for making this session is because in past, Azure PaaS has faced a lot of security issues. PaaS is a kind of a service model where the consumer deploy their applications or develop their applications, and later it is used for the enterprise. If you take an example here, in November 2019, there was a vulnerability they have discovered which is called as a Azure Stack spoofing vulnerability. And this vulnerability allowed the remote attacker to perform spoofing attack. And the vulnerability exists due to the Azure Stack failed to validate certain requests. In this case, what happened is remote attacker can send a specifically crafted request to Azure Stack user portal and perform the spoofing attack. But things was not stop here. In August 26, 2021, okay, another thing which is found, which is called as a concern in the Cosmo DB database, because when you go for the PaaS environment, provider basically provide you the database, structure and unstructured both. Okay, so they have discovered that they're able to access the keys, they control the database which is held by the thousands of customers. You can imagine. And it's one of the biggest concern. Things was not stop here. Then what happened in December 2021, again Microsoft App Service flaw the exposed of the customer source code and the security flaw found in the Azure App Services. Okay, it was basically found in the Azure App Services. And the security flaw was kind of things where they have exposed the PHP, Node, Python, Ruby, Java customer source code. So you can imagine how critical is the Azure PaaS environment, and that is why I'm making this video. Okay, so these are the three major vulnerabilities which we have discovered in the Azure PaaS environment. So now we're going to discuss about the security governance of PaaS and why we need to secure our PaaS platform. There are some responsibility you as a customer have and some customer responsibility which Microsoft has. So you need a clear visibility about that. See, when you're talking about the cloud environment, when organization adopt any kind of a cloud service, so security team will work toward the two main objectives. They work toward the two objectives. Example, like if I'm a consumer, okay, I will go for the cloud service because of two reasons. One, I will use cloud as a security, or I will use cloud as a solution. Okay, so here, what is the security aspect? The first is called as security of the cloud. Security of the cloud. It means I need to secure the cloud resources. Okay, suppose I have taken a PaaS environment, and on top of it, I need to enhance the security. Example like this way. This is my customer, and I'm using a Azure PaaS environment. And my responsibility as a security professional is to secure this area so that I can able to provide the secure environment in which I can able to develop my application. That is the one aspect. But in this case, when you're talking about the security of the cloud, in this case, the most important thing is that how the security should be integrated. So what we do, we used to integrate into the planning. And the operation of a cloud service is to ensure those core security assurance are consistently applied across all the resources, where we introducing a security as a requirement in the design phase itself, like containerization security or environment security or variable functions to be defined in such a manner so that, further if I do any kind of a development in that, it will remain secure. So this is it's more responsibility lies with the cloud customer in this particular case. So this is the one aspect of the security. Second is security from the cloud, where you're using a cloud to transform your security. So in this case, the security will be immediately start planning and thinking about how to use cloud technology to modernize the security tool and process, and particularly integrate it with the security tools. So security tools are increasingly hosted in the cloud, which providing the capability that are difficult or impossible to do in the on-prem environment. Nowadays we have a CASB. So CASB is basically providing me a complete visibility to avoid the shadow IT. So now we are using CASB as a service. So as a customer, I'm using CASB as a service. I'm using vulnerability management as a service, or I'm using firewall as a service, or I'm using security as a service, by which I'm trying to secure my cloud environment. So I'm using cloud as a security because my on-prem is not much very secure. Okay, so this is the two aspects we have from a security point of view. One, we need to secure our cloud, which I'm taking, or we are using a cloud security as a services from the provider. So we have a two dimensions here. In order to discuss in detail, I would like to bring the thin line difference between what is the responsibility of the cloud customer and what is the responsibility of the cloud provider. So you get a better visibility from that. Now, if you notice in this diagram, we're talking about the responsibility matrix. Okay, so we have two aspects. One is your on-prem, where you host your own data center and you have an end-to-end control over that environment. Or the second is basically you moving from on-prem to the cloud. In cloud, you definitely have a biggest concern is visibility. So when we're talking about the shared, when you're talking about the responsibility matrix, okay, in all the three service model, whether it is the IaaS, PaaS and SaaS, physical security lies with the cloud provider. And in IaaS, PaaS and SaaS, okay, data security and governance and regulation, it always lies with the cloud customer. Okay, so if you can see this diagram, we have three verticals here. Responsibility, which is transferred to cloud provider when you migrate from on-prem to cloud. So physical data center, physical network, physical nodes. So in this case, it is a responsibility of Microsoft. In this section, the responsibility varies. As I said, if you're going for the IaaS, you need to have a control over the virtualization. In the case of PaaS, you have a control over the application what you deploy. And in the case of SaaS, you have a control over the application settings only. You need to understand you have a very limited visibility in the case of SaaS. And when you're dealing with the SaaS providers, you need to be very careful with the contracts and all that. Okay. So this can be your interview question also. In which service model we have a limited customization and you need to focus more on the contract. So it's very important for you. In the case of SaaS environment, you need to have a good contract, which called as a vendor contract or favorable contract requirement, like right to audit. You need to know the visibility of the data locations, controls, SOC 2 reports, because we want more and more effectiveness of the control and more visibility and oversight in the case of SaaS. And in the case of IaaS, you already have a more visibility. Again, after the SaaS, the environment in which you have another limited visibility is basically PaaS. In PaaS, the major concern is all about the migrations, switching from one provider to another provider, because in the IaaS you get a machine and you can deploy anything on top of it. But in the PaaS, we just get a platform. We are migrating the application, we're migrating the own application, we're developing our own application. And tomorrow, if I want to migrate from Microsoft to AWS, we have a lot of restrictions. So do the proper testing before doing migration, or before we're trying to migrate from on-prem to cloud in the PaaS environment. Do one test migrations, check for the contract, do they prefer to support open APIs, blah blah blah. So all those things is required. You need to be very careful when it comes to the PaaS and SaaS environment. So that is the thing. So when we going for any kind of a application development in the PaaS environment, okay, the one thing what we need to perform is the threat modeling. Threat modeling, if you go by the definition, it is called as a scenario analysis of the threat. Scenario analysis of the possible threat that we identify during a design phase of an application development. So when we design any application, I'm not talking about development, I'm designing, where I'm designing the complete data flow diagram of application. From there, we're trying to document what can be the possible threat. Let me give you one scenario. Example, like I'm building one website. Okay, so website basically have a 3 layers. Layer 1 is my application. Layer 2 is my business logic layer. And layer 3 is my operating system. So we have a user here. User wish to connect. So user send the request to website. Problem is that client don't want a certificate. He want a HTTP to be used. You don't want a HTTPS because cost is involved. So first we understood the nature of business here is, the nature of business is e-commerce. And in e-commerce, we are dealing with a lot of credit cards and all that. So we prefer to use HTTPS. So during a design phase, okay, design phase come into the picture after the functional requirement is documented. Okay. So first phase is understanding a requirement. Second phase is documenting the functional requirement we need in that application. And based on that, we design the entire application on a walkthrough. It's more like on document. So here we discovered one threat. If I use HTTP over HTTPS, then spoofing is possible. Man in the middle attack is possible. Then another important thing I discovered during a business logic layer, there's no validation happening. So input validation is possible here. SQL injection is possible here. No one is basically patching the OS. Then there is another threat we have. So what happened is by designing the entire application, we identify the possible threats so that during a development, we can consider all these threats, and according to that we suggest the controls, because security, if we introduce post development, it will be more expensive than introducing in the design phase. That's why we follow the principle called security by design principle. So threat modeling is a process of identifying the security threats to your business and applications and ensuring that proper mitigations are in place. And it's also very important, as the SDL, they specify the team which engage in the threat modeling during a requirement to design phase only. And by this way, we can able to save cost. So here what happened is we have followed the Microsoft threat modeling only, which is basically called as a STRIDE. STRIDE. So in this case, what we did, we applied a STRIDE as a methodology in a PaaS environment. Okay, so we assess our PaaS environment. We identify that, okay, if you want to connect with the PaaS, we need a HTTPS connection. And by this way, I can protect against spoofing. Okay, because if the PaaS environment is configured without password, without username, anyone can basically type any random username, any random password, and they can able to access. So spoofing can be addressed with the strong authentication, and for that we need a strong HTTPS connection, because I don't want anyone to spoof the session, use that username password and try to hack again or try to gain access. So we discover we need to use HTTPS. Then we also understood that any user from a random system is connecting. I want to ensure the integrity of the session. So I want to introduce a certificate. So here we have a tampering, which is another important threat. Okay, which compromise my integrity, and in order to address that, we want a SSL and TLS certificate, because as a client, when you're communicating with the server basically send the certificate. Make sure certificate is coming from the right source. Okay, without any modifications. We basically add with the digital signatures of the known CA. you know very well, right? And then from there we extract the session key, and that key used to extract the public key, and the public key used to encrypt the session key. So we need a certificates, we need to verify the signatures, by which we need to ensure it is signed by the unique or their known CA. So by this way we can able to protect against the tampering. Third, I need to enable the logs. I want to monitor all the session calls. I need diagnostic all the application services. Okay, so that is basically part of the reputation. Reputation mean where the user or action can or subject can able to deny. So I don't want any kind of a thing where they can deny for their actions. Okay, that is called as a non-reputation. Now during a PaaS environment, when we're doing any kind of a development, there is a possibility that keys are not well embedded in the applications. The key were not properly integrated, and that lead to the disclosure of data. So it's very important. I need to preserve the confidentiality of the code. Code is a trade secret, code is a trademark, code is a trade copyright, or it's like a valuable project or valuable asset for the company. So it's very important to preserve the confidentiality, and that is basically achieved through the keys and all that. On a regular basis, we need to monitor, because cloud driven by the availability. So we discover the performance in initial stage, and based on that we implement some kind of filters by which we can able to protect the application against the DOS attacks. And we can also integrate the identity management, and in the identity management I can able to apply the principle of least privilege. So by this way, if any instance or any container got compromised in a PaaS, maximum impact will be limited to that container only. And if any user is compromised in that, the user is already configured with the principle of least privilege. So they cannot do any worse with that, because it was created for a defined task, and they cannot proceed more than that to perform any kind of further activities. Normally what happens, a system gain access, they compromise the administrator, and from there they compromise the complete system consoles. So if you integrate with the PIM or any kind of a console for the PaaS, we can issue the usernames, we can issue all the subjects with the limited privilege only. So by this way we can able to address all the possible threat in a PaaS environment. So this is how we applied a stride as a mechanism in my PaaS environment. So if you can see this diagram, it's a diagram which I have taken from the Microsoft website. Now if you notice, in the on-prem you have a end-to-end control of everything, but in the PaaS the things are basically shared. Now starting at the bottom of the stack, okay, here till this part. Okay, so physical infrastructure. So Microsoft mitigate common risk and responsibility, because Microsoft Cloud is continually monitored by Microsoft, so it is hard to attack. It does not make sense for attacker to pursue the Microsoft Cloud as a target. Unless the attacker has a lot of money and resource, the attacker is likely to move on to the another target. But if you're talking about in the middle of stack, there is no difference between the PaaS deployment and on-prem. So at the application layer, if you can notice, an account and access management, you have a similar risk. Here you can see, if you have a application data and you have an application code, here we have an admin access. Okay, so if you can notice in this area, okay, so network configuration, definitely we don't have any control. Okay, but we can ask, do they using any kind of a TLS, because TLS is more secure than SSL 1.3. Whatever the application I'm going to deploy, I need to protect the code. Okay, make sure we do proper assessment of our code which I'm going to deploy on that, because if they discover any kind of flaw in the code, by which there is a possibility they can able to penetrate into the tenant. Because in the case of PaaS environment, we don't have access to the shell, but when we do the coding or doing our deployment in the application, the logic call of the application still can call for the tenant, or they can call for the shell, and through which there is a possibility one tenant can able to access the other tenant. Okay, so it's very important, whatever the application code you are deploying, okay, it should be hack free. So proper assessment or regular assessment need to be done, because you have a complete control over the application what you're going to deploy there. So as a cloud security consultant, you can request, or as an information security consultant, you can request for the regular reports which of the application that we're deploying on that environment. Along with that, if you want a proper accountability that, okay, this particular code need to be run by a particular user, you can integrate with the Active Directory. So this is how you can have a application authentication, you can have identity systems, and if you need to have any kind of admin activities and all that, then you can find the admin access. Along with that, if user want to do the testing after deployment and all that, we can give them access. That is called as a depending upon least privilege design. So they're accessing a particular piece of code. They are testing a particular piece of application based on the use cases. So give them only unnecessary privilege to perform this activity. So as a cloud auditor or as a cloud security consultant, here you can pick the samples of the user account and see, do they follow the least privilege design as a feature? Because if we giving them a complete access to the code or a complete access to the application, then it's a concern. Another important thing, when the application you developed and with the help of that the data has been used, we also need to use the key management. So we have a two type of key management. One, instance manage key, or second is basically key manage externally. It is always a best practice to keep the key external to the instance. So suppose this is my instance we have. Okay. So you can have a key management also in the cloud, but whenever they call for the encryption decryption, the key management need to call for the key from the customer. So you can keep the key on-prem. Okay. You can keep the key on-prem with you. So whenever you call for the applications and all that, key management will call for the key, you enter the key, and by this it decrypts. So key management is a very important thing. Key management is basically the responsibility of the cloud customer. Okay. While the key management is an additional responsibility, you have an area in a PaaS deployment that you no longer have to manage, so you can shift those resources to the key management. So again, it is up to you. But it's very important that key never be embedded in the application itself. It is one of the vulnerable stage of an application, because if someone compromises the application, from there they can able to retrieve those codes. Okay, so that is the thing you need to understand. So we have a two type of management, as I said, instance manage code, and second is basically called as a external manage key. So it is always a best practice to keep the external manage key never be embedded in the application. Okay. So let's move to the next part. So you get a better visibility about how to integrate the things. The key is the only way you can able to protect the code. So you need to check that who will basically responsible for the keys and all that. Okay. So after understanding the threats, now we're going to discuss about the best practice for the cloud security, which is specifically for the PaaS environment. First, make sure you should ensure the security of your key and credential to ensure the key security of your PaaS implementation. So it means secure your keys and credentials to secure your PaaS deployment, because losing these keys and credential is a common problem. So you can use some kind of a centralized solutions where keys and secrets can be stored in a hardware security modules. Azure also offer you the service which is called as a key vault. So Azure key vault safeguards you can use to secret your encrypting authentication keys or storage account keys or data encryption keys in a PFX files or any kind of password which is using a key that is protected by the HSM. So it's very important to secure the key. Second is never store credentials or other sensitive information in the source code. Okay, mean that don't put credentials and other secret in a source code, because the only thing worse than losing your key is that credential is having an unauthorized party gain access to them. So attacker can take advantage of the bot technology to find the keys and the secret which is stored in the code repository. So never ever put the keys and secret in the public code repository. Third, protect your VM management interface on a hybrid PaaS and IaaS environment. It's very important for you to protect the VM console. Like we have a SSH, we have a RDP, we have a PowerShell. So we are using this. So in general, we recommend that you do not enable the direct remote access to the VMs from the internet, because it can be vulnerable for the session hijacking and all that. So make sure these consoles should be accessed from their LAN environment. And use strong authentications and authorization platforms. So use federated identities in Azure AD instead of using a custom user stores. And when you're using a federated identities, you take advantage of the platform-based approach. You delegate the management of authorized identities to your partners. Okay, so that can be do. And make sure whenever you're giving access in the federations and all that, review the access on a regular basis. Along with that, we have some other best practices, like example, restrict the access based on a need to know and least privilege. You can restrict the incoming source IPs. You can regularly check your PaaS environment access from which IP, so you can restrict some set of IPs and all that. From the logs, you can able to monitor the security state of your app services and environment. Implement the web application firewall, which basically protect on the layer 7. So when you access the applications or when you're running an application, there is a possibility that someone tried to upload some kind of a input validation, input queries, or some kind of a legitimate some kind of a illegitimate query. So web application firewall can able to provide the extra protection. But one thing is that when you're installing a web application firewall, it delay the performance also. So more security is one of the solution we have. Then use client-side encryption for the high-value data. If you're planning to host an application, along with that, you're going to host data there. So use the client-side encryption where the key managed by you. So client-side encryptions enable you to programmatically encrypt data in transit before uploading to the Azure storage, and programmatically decrypt the data when retrieving it. How it works, example, like this is my application we have. So this is basically the PaaS environment. So as a user, when I'm sending a data, this application will encrypt and then it basically store in the PaaS. And when we're retrieving from the PaaS, this application will decrypt and provide the things to me. So this is basically a good feature, but again, it impact the performance. And second thing is that tomorrow, if I'm searching any kind of a data, it's difficult for me to search for the indexing. It is difficult for me to do the indexing of a data. So client-side encryption is the most secure method of encrypting your data, but it does not require you to make the programmatic change to your application, and they put the key management process in place. You're getting a point? So that is the thing we have. Then you need to enable the storage service encryption at data at rest. So we prefer to use AES 256. Okay, so during an audit, you can recommend AES 256, and Microsoft handle all the encryption deployment key management with the help of that feature only. Okay, so these are the key practices we have. Along with that, when you're taking a services, it's a lesson for every CISO is evaluate the risk before taking a service from a cloud provider. Check the type of service category, deployment models. It's very important for you to understand that. Do they have availability zones in the same country, data localization, review the contract, SOC 2 reports, last tested BCP plans. So these kind of things need to be checked. Okay. Always set up a notification for a cloud vendor. So whenever the cloud vendor sending any kind of a new updates and all that, so you must be up to date with those, informations and all that. It's very important for you to understand and to be informed about the security risk. So you can set up the alerts from the other websites also. So you must be familiar with all the new alerts which is coming from a PaaS environments, which also give you the idea about the attack patterns and all that. Example, you discover you got one email regarding one vulnerability in the PaaS environment, and they also explain the process, how they exploit that. Okay, so it can be a learning for us. So, and by this way, you try to do the same testing on your PaaS environment proactively to check whether it is secure or not, and also check to see whether the vendor you work with having a bug bounty programs, because by bug bounty program, they will be proactive with their threats. They motivating the community. The community is more engaged in their applications. They engage in their infrastructure. So that kind of visibility we get, because see, when things are basically hosted outside and we have a more visibility. So when we have a more visibility, then more eyes are basically on that, and by this more testing will be done on that, and by this we can able to secure it more effectively. So that is why we always prefer that they should have some kind of a bug bounty programs, or review where the vendor draw the lines. You cannot assume, okay, in CCSP or in AWS security, everywhere it is mentioned, it is my responsibility. Not at all. Do not consider like that. It's very important for you to understand that what is your responsibility and what is the vendor responsibility. And for that, you need to document same in the contract. Okay, contract is the third party governance document. Okay, anything in the contract that need to be defined. And make sure if you're going for any kind of APIs and all that, do the proper testing of the API. Okay, validate the APIs, follow the security guideline, and according to that, develop the APIs. If you want to go for further things, another important practice is you can able to prevent the threats. You can bring the micro segmentation and zero trust practice. That's the most important thing. So if tomorrow any particular portion of application is compromised, so it will be limited to that particular area, and that micro segmentation you can achieve by using a containerization. So example, we have a container 1, we have a container 2, we have a container 3s. So for a worst case scenario, attacker able to compromise this container. So he will be maximum limited to this area only because we have created a micro segmentations. Okay. Visibility is the most important things. You can't secure what you cannot see. So, and if you cannot secure, if you are in trouble, you are in trouble. So you need a tool that give you the broad vision, so to speak, into the entire platform. That's why we recommend to use CASB kind of a thing, which give you better visibility. Then classify data. So you can decide what data you want to upload in the cloud. Okay, what kind of a data you want to test in the cloud. So you need to classify the data, having a meeting with the business owners, understand the nature of data, understand the legal regulatory requirement, and according to that, decide the data to be uploaded in the cloud. Take a risk-informed approach. So cloud security recognize that these unavoidable threats exist and take a risk-informed approach to secure your information. So risk-informed security is based on analyzing, assessing the risk, then managing those risks in an informed way. For example, you can develop a risk taxonomy that detail the risk that most concern you and your company, and then map to the risk in your taxonomy to control and mitigate those risks. So risk-informed approach can help you to address the most important security risk instead of addressing the risk that you already know how to mitigate. Along with that, we will basically design our own operating models, review the control objectives. That is another thing. Adopt the data-driven approach. Engage your team, engage your people to upgrade on the new threats, new vulnerabilities, so proactively they can able to develop the application in secure manner. So transformations to the cloud security is an opportunity to rethink your security operation model and how should your security team work with the development team. And you also need to understand what kind of a model you have. So this is how you can able to train your force. One thing you need to remember, risk cannot be eliminated. And when you're moving the operation to the cloud, it doesn't mean you have mitigate the risk. You're just transferring the impact to third party. You are always answerable for all the breach. So if you find this video useful, I request you to share your views in a comment section and let me know what is the next video you want from my side. I will try my best in my and make that kind of a videos. And if you want more CISO lesson series in future, do share your things in a comment box. And if you find this video useful, do share in your network. And if you're new to this channel, do subscribe to my YouTube channel and click on the bell icon. Thank you.